Today, on the Tyra Hill Show, I'm talking woman to woman with my mother. Many of you may not know, but for years, my mother and I's relationship was dysfunctional. As a child, I often felt disliked, unheard, unloved, and misunderstood. It wasn't until I started therapy that I realized I could never really understand my mother until I got to know her story. You know, we as women, we all have stories. And our childhood matters. Childhood trauma, generational trauma, and sexual trauma. It often shapes us into the women that we become. I wanted to heal my mother and I's relationship, so I started asking the hard questions. Today, her and I sit with you and we have a real conversation, woman to woman. Let's talk about it. Hello, and welcome to the Tyra Hill Show. I am your leading lady, Tyra Hill, and today I'm having a personal conversation with my mom. Today, this conversation will be woman to woman. Often, I speak with women from all walks of life who are in good situations with their mothers. And when I hear them talk about their estranged relationship with their moms, it breaks my heart. And it also takes me back to a very dark place where my mother and I weren't on good terms either. I've come to learn with the help of therapy that my mother and I are alike in a lot of ways. And a lot of things that we may share in common are generational curses, sexual trauma, generational trauma, and childhood trauma. So I wanted to have a conversation with my mother so we could talk about the things that we've experienced as daughter and mother, or mother and daughter, and how we got through it. I have to be honest with you, it wasn't easy and it was a lot of work. But today we stand united, and I am so excited about this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my beautiful mother, Bertha. Hi, Mommy. Hi, Mom.
Hi,
How are you?
I am wonderful. It's truly an honor to be on stage with my oldest daughter.
You,
Thank you,
you
Tyra.
look so pretty.
Thank you, and so do you as well.
Thank you. You know they say I look just like you, girl.
Girl, I know that's what they say all of your life.
All of my life they said I look like you, I sound like you. And so let's just do a little icebreaker real quick before we get into this much needed and much anticipated conversation. I remember being younger and you were dating, and your boyfriends would call the house. And I would answer the phone, and sometimes they would think I was you. And because I'm a jokester, I would kind of pretend like I was you. And then I would say, well, hold on, let me get my mama. Do you remember that?
I remember those conversations. I sure do. And then I always wonder, like, you need to ask, is this Bertha before you start talking?
Right, because I didn't want to hear none of your secrets, honey.
Well, those were back in the days, and they were good days.
Yeah, they were. Listen, I am so honored to have you first and foremost. Still here on earth. I thank God for you every day because a lot of women no longer have their moms, right? And so I know that the women, some women that still have their moms here on earth, mommy, they don't have good relationships. And so I wanted to produce a show where we could be transparent about our journey as daughter and mother, or mother and daughter. And sometimes I think that if people would just have conversations, healing would take place. Do you agree?
I do agree, But sometimes I found out, even in our relationship, those conversations are sometimes hard conversations.
They are. They are, and especially when when there hasn't been anybody to kind of help navigate through the conversation. Maybe like a therapist. Um, some people prefer their pastors or their ministers. And so, when nobody is there to mediate or to help people navigate through those hard conversations, it causes a much stronger breakdown than it was before. A lot of times I think that if we listen more, we'll hear better. So let's get into this conversation. Today, we're talking woman to woman. And so, one of the things I want to start off with is in the beginning of healing our relationship, I found it extremely hard to have real conversations with you. And I don't know if it was because you were afraid to be vulnerable, or if you just weren't ready to have those real conversations. What do you think it was, Mom?
Well, some of the things that I thought about, even in our conversations, Tyra, was I didn't have any. My mother was a good mom,
Mm-hmm.
and the being approachable to her was unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like you have this um window or wall
Mm-hmm.
that you don't want to be bothered,
Mm-hmm.
or you say what you say and you mean what you say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's that you don't want to be bothered. I just think that it's because nobody was taught healthy communication or how to communicate. And see, and so here's the problem. A lot of things that I wanted to talk to you about, grandma or big mama would have deemed it disrespectful. You get what I'm saying? A lot of conversations, like back in your day, whatever your parents said, you did. You didn't have a voice. You didn't question anything. And so
Absolutely.
I think that's what kind of made it hard for you to even be able to listen to me, because in the back of your mind, although we know now that it's not disrespectful, you probably thought I was just a disrespectful child.
Well, I don't think that you were a disrespectful child. Matter of fact, I know you was not. Um, because when I was, Mama said, go out there and rake the yard, we couldn't say, give me a minute, you know what I'm saying? Or we just went and did it.
Mm-hmm.
With you, if and you did the same thing, like Tyra, is your bedroom done? Tyra, I need you to do this. You always went and did it. So that part was never a problem about being disrespectful because you weren't disrespectful.
Right, right, right. But I think that sometimes um, what we're experiencing now in 2023 is children are finding it hard to have conversations with their parents, and it's straining their relationships because parents are deeming individual truth to be disrespectful. you know. And so I kind of just want to break down that wall and to just say, everybody has a voice, even children. Tracy talks about this all of the time, how children are never afforded a voice. And sometimes, if we give our children those voices, then maybe we wouldn't be dealing with a lot of molestation and different things. Because when we tell our children, you are only to be seen and not heard, and not really just tell them that, but by our actions, it stops them from being open and honest with us as parents. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And it goes back into the way that they were raised,
Right.
you
So
know,
let's
and
get
then it
that.
goes, like you said, those generational curses causes a division if you don't understand each other.
So you were talking about your upbringing, and I really want to get into the upbringing because I think that that is a breakdown in a lot of relationships. Let's talk about your childhood, Mom. Tell us a little bit about Big Mama.
Well, my mother was an amazing mother. Um, and she did the best she could with no education. But I am going to say, as far as rearing us and teaching us right from wrong, she was an amazing mother.
Mm-hmm.
She taught us values, how to respect, how to listen, work ethics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my mom was good, but she was also a mother that was very few words as far as mothering
Mm-hmm.
because we learned by watching.
Did Big Mama tell you every day that she loved you?
No, no,
Mm-hmm.
no. I was actually in my 30s
Mm-hmm.
when my mom first told me, use the word I love you.
Really?
Yes, yes,
And
absolutely.
that's hard for me to believe because she was just she was a phenomenal mother to you, but she was a phenomenal grandmother to me. And so she told me she loved me all the time.
And
And I
you're right because I remember calling my mom as an adult and start telling my mom when I finished with the conversation with her, like, Mom, I love you. And then she would start saying it back. And
mm-hmm.
from that day forward, we would never hang up the phone without us telling each other that I love you.
Well, see, and that's hard for me because I couldn't imagine growing up in a house and you didn't tell Nina and I that you loved us. But
Well,
it's a lot of
but I knew she loved me by her actions. I
but
never
and,
questioned
and
the
I,
love for
I
my
I
mom.
get that. I get that. And let me say this. Big Mama is not on trial here. We're just having a conversation. But what I'm
Right.
saying to you is this. Not being told that you were loved as a child affected you in some kind of way. Because all children need to hear that they are loved, regardless if they're being shown or not. And I think that this is the generational breakdown that has so many families at odds with each other, and there's estrangement there because it wasn't until I got into therapy that I understood that me providing my son with food, clothes, shelter, making sure he had a good education are things that I was supposed to do as a mother. You don't get brownie points for being a parent and for doing the things that you should do as a parent. But it's those little things that matter, being told that you're loved, or being told that you're beautiful, or being told that you're smart, and being told that you could be anything in this world. And so I'm not saying that Big Mama was a bad mom because she didn't tell you that she loved you, but I guarantee you that some way it showed up in your life, whether it was the decisions and choices that you made with men, whether it was the lack of self love for yourself. And so I'm just saying, like, no child should not be told that they are loved every day. And I'm glad that you broke that curse. Like you were the one to break it because you told us that you loved us every day.
Yes, I did.
But it goes back to Big Mom's mom not telling her that she loved her every day or that she was beautiful. And that's what we're talking about. Those those generational things that hold generations to come hostage. Do you think that your grandmother told your mom that she was beautiful or pretty and that she loved her every day?
Well, my great great grandmother, I didn't meet her till probably I was probably like 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm. So you were 8 years old when you met your grandmother.
Yes.
And how was that for you? Because I couldn't imagine not knowing my grandmother, like from a baby.
Well, my grandmother lived in Mobile, Alabama. Which was my mother's mother, and so she moved to Michigan when I was in second grade.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was amazing to find out who my grandmother was, um, and my mother was happy to have her there, so it was exciting.
Mm-hmm. How was grandma's relationship with her mom?
It was good. It was actually good. I never seen um, my mom or my grandmother even have an argument or anything. So it was a good relationship from where I was setting.
Okay. 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 On the outside looking in, of course, because you wouldn't know if it was any type of um, breakdown there because they just didn't talk about things.
No, they did not.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just, and that's where I think a lot of the miscommunication comes from because generations were reared differently. And so a lot of times when I speak to young women or even to women my age or women your age, and we begin to talk about our childhood and our parents or our relationships with our mothers, one of the things that I've learned is it's not that Big Mama didn't want to tell you that she didn't love you every day, and she showed you clearly she did love you because she showed you
Exactly.
every day. Um, but she just didn't have it to give to you because nobody instilled it into her. Would that be fair to say?
That would be fair to say, Tyra. And um, just going back into the action part of
Mm-hmm.
of my mom being there, cooking, cleaning, making sure we had food, sending us to school.
Did grandma have the sex talk with you all?
My mother never had uh, the talk with us girls about sex. You know, I have 3 other sisters, and my sisters talk to me about sex.
Really?
Yes.
Which one of your
Uh,
sisters talked to you mostly taught you about sex?
my oldest sister, me and my sister was oldest sister is very close even to today. We didn't go into the details about it. Um, because again, she really didn't know.
Right, right. How was it for you um not being able to have that type of conversation with your mom? Thank God for Bixa. But how was it for you not to have that type of conversation with your mom, especially when you started your minstrel, like your womanhood? Who had that conversation with you?
Well, I told my mom that I was had a my cycle,
Mm-hmm.
and she told my sister Barbara to tell me and to show me what to do.
Really?
Yes.
And I'm giggling because it just amazes me how each generation is different. and how each generation is dealt with differently. Because I started my cycle at 8 or 9, and I was outside playing football with the boys. You remember that?
Yep.
And I ran in the house and I'm like, I'm bleeding. Like, like I'm bleeding. And you had that conversation with me. And so but this is what I mean by each generation has to do it differently. And we have to be more transparent because the world is ever evolving. And so, Mom, kudos to you for just having that conversation with me and teaching me about my cycle and what to do and what not to do. And your mama was just so old school. I hated going to her house when I was on my cycle because she wouldn't even let you take a bath.
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
I'm like, Big Mama, I need to take a bath. And she's like, no. And so that was just that old school mentality.
Yes. Because
And
that's what she was taught.
and
You
that's what
did not get in water when you
mm-hmm,
was on your cycle.
right. And then I could kind of even remember her making me my own maxi pads.
Yep. Which was white towels or white parts of a white sheet.
Yes. And,
Yep.
and you know what's so crazy about that? Oh, I feel like I'm telling my age. Ooh, so if I'm telling my age, girl, I'm telling your age too.
You sure live.
But what's so funny about that is we go back to those things now. You know, things that Big Mama, those remedies,
Yes.
we still use them till this day. Maybe not the maxi pad part, but you know, when the baby is teething, or when the baby has a diaper rash, or if you have an earache, or if you have a stomach ache, Big Mama was just the woman to go to. Because in my mind, she was a doctor.
And you're right though, because I remember what mom, of course mama had asthma,
Right.
you know, and she had it so bad that she was always using her inhaler.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone that she knew gave her what she needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And she did it.
Yeah. And that was cannabis. And I'm so tickled because she wasn't a smoker. But when I got older, I found out, of course, because you know, when you're a kid, you stay in a child's place, honey. You don't ask questions. You just don't say nothing. Right. But when I got older, you know, and because we were very close, I knew that she smoked cannabis to help control her asthma. And so that just tickled me to death, you know. And so I just get so tickled because I remember breaking out in hives as a child, and or catching the chicken pox, and being at Big Mama's house and her just taking care of me, like putting that paste stuff on me. Um, and it's so funny because I know childhood friends who also caught chicken pox, and they still have those black marks on them from the chicken pox. I walked away unscathed. Didn't have any marks, didn't have any black spots. Like whatever grandma mixed up, she should have put it on shelves and sold it. Do you
And you're
remember?
right though, because and you're right, some of those old remedies, they really work.
Mhm.
And they still work today.
They still work to this day. But we can go back and talk about that, um, because I don't think people understand the limited resources that Big Mama and them had. They didn't have the resources to keep going to doctors, or even the ability to go see a doctor because of their skin color, or even the ability to afford a doctor. So a lot of times in the African American community, they were their own midwives, their own doctors, their own loan officers, you know, or their own soup kitchens. That's one of the things that I think the reason why you move the way you move and I move the way I move when it comes to feeding people is because anybody could come to the house and eat. And we didn't have a lot. But grandma's store was always open for anybody that was hungry.
My mother did not meet any strangers.
Mm-hmm.
She fed anybody that was hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there were people in the neighborhood knew if they went by Miss Mary's house, they could eat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is that why you evolved into that type of woman?
I know in my heart that it came from my mom
Mm-hmm.
because of what she did,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't never ask for anything in return when she did
Mm-hmm.
those things, feeding, or if anybody needed some change, she would find some change to give them. Um, and I know it came from her because
Mm-hmm.
that's just who she was.
Mm-hmm. 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 So let me ask you this. Going back to your childhood, was there any trauma that you experienced?
Um, I don't really think. I think the biggest trauma that I experience is um every Saturday morning we used to go to the Goodwill,
Okay.
and it would open up at 9 o'clock in the morning. We were probably there at 8:45,
Okay.
and we would be other people would be there lined up at the door as well, and we would go in there, and we would go through stuff, and we would find things for us to wear.
Mm-hmm. So
And so, as a kid growing up, there was no uniform, so we had to wear our regular clothes to school. And so we used to mix and match things, change the bottom, change the tops. Um, and I think that took me through a part of my life where I said I would never be able again to go into a closet and not have 10 or 11 things to pick versus 4 and 5.
okay. Okay. So you never really got to go into a department store and get any new clothes with price tags on them.
Absolutely not.
So you all would just go to the Goodwill
Go
and
to the
get your
Goodwill.
clothes.
Yes.
Wow. And that's crazy because I don't have that memory with Big Mama, but the memory I do have with her um, is getting up Saturdays early. Of course, we weren't going to the big Goodwill because by this time, my Big Mama had money, honey. And she couldn't read or write, but she was very resourceful. And whatever I wanted, she made sure I had. But we did get up, and I would go to the laundromat with her. We
Yes.
catch a cab to the laundromat, and it would be loads of clothes. And so our Saturday was spent at the laundromat from sun up to sundown, right? And so
Right.
it's funny you said that, Mom, because in my mind as a kid, I said, I ain't never going to the laundromat. I'm always have a washer and dryer. And so I just think it's funny how we experience things in our childhood that molded us into the women that we are today. Because what was y'all washing y'all clothes with on the washing board?
We was using a washboard,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a 10 round tub,
Mm-hmm.
and we would put the washing board in the tub, fill it up with water, the tub, and we
Mm-hmm.
would scrub our clothes and hang them up on the line.
And I'm asking you these questions because I don't think that our generation, my generation, understands how blessed we are.
And
Because
you know what, Tyra, that is such a good statement because there's so many kids, adults, even adults that don't even recognize how blessed they are because even then, back then, even when it was hard, we were still blessed.
Mm-hmm.
We just became in the 2023 to become more blessed.
Mm-hmm. 21st century. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Do you think, and this is kind of, I don't, know how you're going to take this because, and let me say this, none of our questions have been rehearsed. This is just a woman to woman conversation. Do you think not meeting your father to 13 played a part in some of the decisions that you made as far as when it came to dating men?
Absolutely. Um, Being in the fourth grade, fifth grade, meeting my dad, and I could have been maybe 11.
Yeah, if you were in the fifth grade, you were 11.
Yeah. Meeting my dad for the first time. And I remember, like it happened yesterday, um, when he pulled up in a burgundy Buick Ford. And my mom said, "There go your daddy." I said, "Where?" She said, "In the driveway."
Wait a minute.
And I said, "My
Wait,
daddy?"
wait a minute. You had never met him before,
No.
and he pulls up, and your mama, my big mama,
Yes.
say, "There go your daddy."
Yes.
Grandma.
And I said, "Where?" She said, "In the driveway." So, I went out there. He got out the car. And mama came outside and, she said, "Hey, Mitchell, how you doing?" And she, they was talking and stuff. And she said, he looked at me, he said, "You my daughter, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir."
Mm.
And from that point on, our relationship began to happen. I remember him asking my mom what size clothes I wear. And
Mm-hmm.
she told him because it was in the summertime, school hadn't started, and he
Mm-hmm.
went and school shopping for the upcoming school year.
So that was the first time you had got you some clothes that had some tags on them.
There were times that I had clothes with tags on them, but
Mm-hmm.
this time it was like Christmas.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We
Christmas
picked
times
up
too.
new, yeah, from time to time, but
Mm-hmm.
this time it was like 8 or 9, 10 outfits.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
And on top of getting a whole new wardrobe and some swag, you met your father for the first time.
absolutely.
And so, growing up, you didn't ask questions about him before you met him?
Absolutely not.
You didn't?
Never.
Why?
Never was discussed. Never was discussed in the house.
So, you never thought in your mind, who is my father? Where is my father? Why don't I know my father?
Never said it. Never questioned it. Never thought about it.
Even when your siblings' fathers came around?
But my sibling fathers didn't come around.
Wow. Wow. So let me get this straight. Big Mama has 9 children. None of the fathers are involved in their children's lives. And you never asked about your father.
Never asked about my father.
Can I ask you why?
It just never even crossed my mind. Ever.
Wow.
I
Okay.
know.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
But this is why we are having these conversations, because when we learn each other as women or get to know each other as women, we understand each other better. I had no clue Well, I was shocked when you told me this week that you met your father at between 11 and 13. That shocked me because I love my grandfather. He was such a great man. I would have
Yes.
never knew that.
Yeah.
And then hearing you say that you never had a desire or even a question about your father and who he was, that kind of breaks my heart for you. And it really breaks my heart for Big Mama because we see it all across America. Mama's baby, daddy's maybe. How many women, especially black women, who are forced to raise multiple children on their own without the help of a father or their fathers. And so we talk about her limited education. She had a second grade education. Her signature was an X. She couldn't read or write. Yet she had enough strength and resilience and determination and discipline to raise her children. So let me ask you this. Did y'all always have plumbing? Didn't y'all have an outhouse?
Yes, we did. We had an outhouse. I was born and raised in the country. There was a season or a time that we didn't have any indoor plumbing. We had an outhouse, and we used what we had.
I just
Yeah.
couldn't imagine. I just couldn't imagine having to go outside to relieve myself. Well, how did y'all take baths?
We had the silver bathtubs.
So y'all was using the silver bathtub to wash y'all clothes and yourselves?
Yes.
Oh, Mama, you the shit. They're gonna have to bleep that out. Because one of the things that I have to say is to see how far you've come from where you were reared and how you raised your daughters. I mean, I thought I was, because, Tracy was like, you got to get to know your mom on a woman to woman level. Tracy's my therapist, but if you all watch my show, you know that. And so I'm like, you're right, because I really don't know anything about my mother outside of her being my mother, right? But getting to know your story and hearing you tell your story, Mom, I have a whole nother level of respect for you. And I'm just so grateful for your tenacity and your resilience. Because there is a term that we don't like to hear, but it's called generational poverty. And whatever was in you was ignited enough for you to say, I'm going to give my children better. Not that you were ashamed of where you came from, or not that you were ashamed of grandma, or I call her Big Mama, of Big Mama, but just to hear your story. And so you all didn't have plumbing. She didn't have the financial resources to take you to the store to buy you brand new shoes or to buy you brand new clothes. But she raised you all in a household full of love. Even though she didn't tell you she loved you, you knew she loved you because you felt the love. You've done a phenomenal job. And unfortunately, we're going to have to do a part 2 to this because I haven't even touched the surface yet. Can you believe the time is up?
Wow.
That time went by quick, did it? But listen, to my fans, thank you for tuning in. We are most definitely going to do a part 2 of this conversation because we haven't even touched the surface yet. My teenage pregnancy, my mother's teenage pregnancy. We haven't even talked about my father yet. And just some of the other things that my mother did as a single mom growing up that I've learned to do differently. So don't go nowhere. Thank you for tuning in to part 1 of Woman to Woman, but make sure you tune in to part 2 as well. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I want to talk about it. On the Tyra Hill Show. Let's talk about it. Tyra Hill Show.